Hello, everyone. Welcome to SVP's Network Block, Unleash Strategic Philanthropy. I am Kelsey. I work for Philanthropy Together as the program and campaign manager. Just a few housekeeping pieces. I want to remind you that we do have closed captioning for this session. All you have to do is enable it down in your screen. I am so unbelievably excited, one, to learn more about SVP and specifically SVP Chicago, but also to learn more about how they're engaging local philanthropists in their field. Make sure you stay back towards the end of our session. We have a feedback poll that will pop up. And if you're in our session, please tweet about it with the We Give Summit hashtag. And with that, I'm going to pass it to our amazing partner, Rachel. So let's get this session started.
Thanks, Kelsey. I really appreciate it. Hello and welcome. I'm really excited to be part of We Give. I know we all are thrilled to be here. My name is Rachel Sample, and I am the Director of Network Learning at SVP International, and I'm here with Evelyn and Cindy from SVP Chicago. We're really excited to bring you this conversation. And we're going to uplift the work of SVP Chicago as they're unleashing strategic philanthropy. We do have both the chat and the Q&A going. We encourage you to use the chat to connect with each other, connect about the session, connect about your comments, etc. If you have specific questions for the panelists, please pop them into the Q&A. We are moderating both. And with that, let's get started. I will let our panelists introduce themselves. Cindy and Evelyn, hello and welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, you know what? It's going to be a fun session when you start off with Lizzo.
Tell me about it.
So I'm Evelyn Fitzgerald. I'm the executive director at SVP Chicago.
And I'm Cindy Paulauskas. I'm currently serving as the board chair for SVP Chicago.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I want to highlight that it is your 10-year anniversary, and we're so thrilled to have you and that you are celebrating with us here. Let's start off, and you can tell us a little bit about why you're shifting your partners toward being more strategic philanthropists.
Yeah, Rachel, this was an actually very intentional decision on our part because we used to, those of you that are familiar with SVP know about this traditional SVP dual mission that's kind of equally focused on philanthropists, but also kind of the local nonprofits that they serve. And we made this intentional decision to come down on the side of strategic philanthropists because we think that our opportunity for scale is growing the number of strategic philanthropists in Chicago. Getting out loud and proud and shouting about kind of strategic philanthropy rather than tackling the nonprofits in Chicago one at a time, 10 at a time, 20 at a time. There are like other SVPs located in large metropolitan areas, there are thousands of nonprofits in Chicago, and just felt like that was not the route in which we were going to make the greatest impact. Cindy, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Well, the good news is I agree with everything you said. And additionally, I think it's about where we were able to scale, but I do want to just point out that it's not that we aren't working with the local nonprofits. We're actually partnering with, a large number of local nonprofits and learning together with them in terms of what makes the most effective strategic philanthropy. So we're being informed in our partnership and collaboration with the local nonprofit network we have that's informing our work with educating, learning from, partnering with our community of strategic philanthropists. So it is not a dual mission. It is 100% focused on scaling strategic philanthropists, but by working with and through the local nonprofit community.
I love that, Cindy. And it's really about our push to change how philanthropy is done in Chicago through, the nonprofits that we are supporting, these community-based nonprofits, but specifically through the people that join SVP, but also other people in Chicago that should roll up their sleeves and get smart about nonprofits that are making outsized impact in their communities.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. Tell us a little bit about how you're guiding and shaping their philanthropy. I'm going to drive us a bit into what is this term strategic for you? Can you share some examples of the change that you're making?
Sure, I'll start. A lot of the change we're making was, as Ev said, being intentional and deliberate in some of the choices that found ourselves dabbling in. And so we've codified it and we're creating a model in terms of what strategic philanthropy is. And the model looks very different today than it did 10 years ago. We've evolved over the last 10 years. And so where we are today is, number one, it's getting proximate. So we're working with the nonprofits where they serve. And so this is not, bringing them to downtown Chicago and asking them to teach us about the work they do. And this is actually going out and looking at the work in motion, meeting community leaders and having them direct us to which nonprofit leaders are really making the biggest impact in their work there. So it's a lot about getting proximate in the communities, I'd say, is one of the major changes we've been doing. The second is in making our selections of nonprofits to work with, starting with the ED and the leadership team. And so there's so many great, as I've said, thousands of nonprofits in Chicago. And so if you can't really choose based on programming, which nonprofits you're going to support, you can choose based on the leader and the leadership team, and being very deliberate in choosing to partner with leaders and leadership teams that come from the communities they serve, which, for the most part means leaders of color is who we're investing in, that are locally born and making a difference where they currently reside or have some kind of a community feeling there. Some of the other changes we're making, I'd say, is deliberately expanding the voices in philanthropy. So we've invited not just the EDs of the nonprofits, but community leaders to help us shape our model. And so we're not, it's not us as just SVP partners trying to decide who to partner with and what a strategic philanthropist is, but it's us being informed by the nonprofits and by the community leaders to shape our model collaboratively with them. And I'd say maybe the final, and in a way most important part, is a trust-based approach to how we're doing philanthropy. We are not just going in, bringing kind of our corporate perspective. A lot of the SVP partners, come from corporate America, and there's a way of doing things, and these tend to be pretty successful people that are SVP partners, and so they've learned along the way that this corporate way is effective, and they've learned to maybe even judge the effectiveness of their work based on how quickly you can get results, how big those results are, and changing that whole philosophy to really investing up front in the relationship with these EDs, because what can maybe feel like a very slow start and months of building trust can actually lead to years of working together really effectively, as opposed to trying to just get some quick wins out the gate to try to get some momentum, which is more of a corporate approach and hasn't served us as well when in working with these communities. I'm sure I left a lot on the table there to talk about.
No, that was beautiful. So much of this is really, we said this kind of, we got together a few minutes before the start of this, of the program, just to make sure that tech was working. And during that time, we were sharing with Rachel that that prepping for this session really kind of helped us think about what is our message 10 years out, right? Like and it's really about what we've learned. And so everything that Cindy's talking about, these are our learnings over the years. We didn't start here, but it really is, it is such a, it's such a great thing for us to see that some of those trust-based practices that we had in place from the very beginning, like giving general operating support, like multi-years of providing support to organizations so they can count on us and know that we're there. Still pull through 10 years out, but there are so many learnings that we've had that have really helped influence how we're making this shift. And a lot of it's what Cindy's talking about. I mean, I can't emphasize enough that point that she made about trust-based and building that relationship. We've heard that loud and clear from the nonprofits that we've been supporting over the past few years, that building that relationship to get to the point where we can do some organization building together, where we can roll up our sleeves and help them behind the scenes, with their organization building, that it's all, if we don't get the trust building right, the rest of it just doesn't follow. And we've seen that over the past 10 years. one of our goals, we're not done learning for sure. So one of our goals kind of going forward to kind of keep following in down this path of thinking about philanthropy differently is getting into communities more organically. Right now we are reaching out to community leaders for their recommendations about nonprofits in their neighborhoods that are making outsized impact. But I would love for us to get to the point where our partners are engaging in community meetings, are having meals in local like hotspots, and finding ways to engage organically where we also have our own sense for who's making outsized impact. So that's kind of our grand vision.
Yeah, I just add one more point that you reminded me of, Ev, is that one of the parts of being strategic in our philanthropy is not just having one type of engagement with the communities and with the nonprofits. So trying to be more organically engaged with the community in general. And so we've really shifted in the last year to being more conscious about where we spend SVP dollars. So it's not just in the formal engagements, but it's also while we're hosting events, trying to do them locally in communities, trying to use local caterers, so this is part of the organic community involvement, really trying to understand the places that we're working, both because if you're going to spend dollars somewhere, it should be in the communities you're trying to support. And second, it does help us build those connections and build those relationships. And so that as we come back, people are excited to have an SVP event in their area because they know all the kind of ripple effects that it can have.
Yeah, and I'll leave this, Rachel, with kind of one last learning is, for the past few years, we've been talking about kind of racial equity and centering racial equity. And we had some interesting conversations with some of our nonprofit leaders because, we were stating a clear preference for supporting organizations with senior leadership teams and led by, people of color. Their point back to us was, yeah, that's great, but what you really should be looking for are leaders that are truly connected to and have kind of personal experience with the issues that they are that they're addressing. Sadly, for a city that is as segregated as Chicago is, that often looks like Black and Brown leaders because our area of focus at SVP Chicago is poverty, but it's more about the connection to the issue than the color of the ED and the senior leadership team. And I thought that was when we talk about kind of and bringing in new voices into philanthropy. I mean, that was one of our lessons learned from engaging with our executive directors and having that very frank conversation about racial equity.
I think, so you said that was the final point. I'll make one more final point. I think that one of the learning you just said highlights some of the changes that have evolved over the last 10 years is we very naively originally kind of had a rubric that would help us decide which organizations we'd be most successful in working with. And so you could see that you might put ED of color, check or not check. And it really is that would be a false way to look at it versus it's one of the factors, but the more important one, and this is where getting proximate, knowing community leaders and really understanding the EDs themselves is how connected that ED is to the issue and to the community. So it's no longer something that you can just fill out on a form. It's information that you have to derive through relationships and learning.
Thank you. I appreciate all of that. I always think we're on a huge learning journey, so I love hearing the journey that you've been on. Can you give me some examples and ways that you're expanding the voices of philanthropy that are getting more community at the table? You've touched on this a little bit, but I would love to understand specifics.
Yeah, as Cindy just mentioned one, we have kind of entirely re-engineered our selection, or we've been doing that throughout the years, but re-engineer the way that we bring new nonprofits into our network. And we are right now centering kind of the voices of community leaders as recommenders for nonprofits that are making outsized impact in their neighborhoods. And they're recommending to us those organizations that have true connection, as we discussed, with the issues that they're tackling. And these are people, these community leaders, as well as the leaders that we're supporting, are people that live in these neighborhoods, that have grown up in these neighborhoods and understand not only what the deficits are, but what the opportunities are, and real opportunities for change that we can help support. Another kind of way that we have relatively recently expanded, our attempt to expand more voices, the philanthropy pool, is to invite the nonprofits we support, we call community partners. So to invite our alumni community partner EDs to join SVP Chicago as full partners. That's at no financial cost to them. This is a pilot program for us. So as of right now, that financial cost is kind of limited to a certain number of years, but right now it's at no financial cost to them. And these partners are eligible to kind of, to join us and to wear any partner hat. They could be mentors to other nonprofits. They could serve on our selection committee for new nonprofits that we work with. They can serve in any of our kind of steering committees and do project work, help us think about how we do what we do at SVP. They could join our board. And so that's just been something that I'm particularly proud about, because this is such a direct way to incorporate the voices of the people that we've been working so closely with for 10 years, but have never had an official seat at the table. Similar to that, and actually, Cindy, you should talk about the advisory committee. This was your brainchild, and we had our first board meeting where we invited our advisory committee members in, and it was such a success. I'd love for you to talk about it.
Yeah, so as Ev said, we now have expanded our partner pool to include EDs that we've partnered with in the past, as when they were leading the organizations that we were collaborating with to build capacity for the work they're doing. It presented an opportunity for how can we get these voices directly into board decisions and board strategy, whether it's strategic planning, shifts in strategic planning, some really the types of issues that come in front of the board are also large operating issues, as you can imagine. So, and how can we get these voices informing our board decisions for the ones that don't join the board? As I've said, there is an opportunity for them to join the board as a regular partner, but that's a big commitment. Our board is no joke in terms of the number of hours that people give. And so we created an advisory committee where they are privy to the board discussions. It's optional for attendance at board meetings. We have gone through a deliberate orientation so that they're as familiar with the strategic plan as all of our other board members are. They're familiar with all the issues that we're tackling, and then they're up to speed. And we had, as I've said, our inaugural board meeting with this committee in place. And the committee consists not only of these EDs, but it also consists of former board members that are still partners, and specifically board chairs. So it's expanding the voices that can advise the board on specific issues. And it was such a success. First, out of the gates, first meeting, to have the voices there that were able to talk to issues directly. It's the classic, back to the corporate world, voice of the customer. If you can have the voice of the customer around the table, you're going to make better decisions. And this was a really elegant way for us to be able to do that. And so now we're moving forward. Again, we're not done. It's going to be the theme. Moving forward, looking at ways that we can expand those voices even more to include some of those other community leaders or experts, as Ev was talking about. So not just the EDs of community partners that we've worked with, but other people that are key in the ecosystem that we think could help influence our decisions in critical ways.
Thank you. Before I move on to our scripted questions, let me just ask you a direct, did you experience pushback in this evolution, and how did you manage your way through that?
This evolution about this, or in general, what we've talked about?
Yeah, about that specifically.
I'd say we did. We encountered pushback. As you could imagine, change is change. And so, and we've gone through so much change, especially in the last few years, that I feel like people feel like we're just getting their feet under them, and then we're changing again. And that's what I love about us, is that we keep pushing forward, and that we we aren't waiting till everything's thought through and ready before we do a big unveil. It's a constant iterative change, is the environment that we work in SVP Chicago. And I do think there was some pushback from board members in terms of, how can these people be rooted appropriately in the issues that they're covering in order to give us the right context of advice. And so a lot of that pushback was fantastic because it helped inform how we launched the committee to make it as successful as possible. So I think it was, not obstructionist pushback, but I think really challenging good questions that helped us shape it in a way that led it to be as successful as it could be out of the gates. And I think also from the EDs that joined us as partners, I do think there was a little bit of, is this just window dressing? And I think that they were happily surprised at how substantive their role was at that last meeting, and we hope will continue to be.
Yeah, Rachel, if you'll just forgive me, I'm just going to answer your question, taking a step back and not focusing on whether there was pushback on this particular advisory committee, which Cindy just shared with you. Yes, there was, and how we kind of worked around it. But we made this shift from focusing on we used to kind of find nonprofits to fill the top of our investment funnel by reaching out through our networks to say, we're putting out a call for LOIs, and so spread the word. Not surprisingly, after a few years, we kept our networks they overlap. And we are starting to see the same kinds of organizations, and quite frankly, the same kinds of downtown organizations. And my guess is everyone on this webinar knows what I'm talking about. So, we made a shift about 3 years ago to really focus on these smaller community-based organizations with this, with recommendations by community leaders. And that was quite a big shift for us. That came with heartburn about, these smaller organizations. And so are they stable? Are they ready to, do they have the bandwidth to work with us? Do we understand the issues there? There was a lot of that kind of, pushback. But, in our SVP, we've had a lot, we intentionally put a lot of partners on our investment committee and change that. It turns over annually. So most of our partners have served on the committee that selects nonprofits that we support. And over the years, we definitely have seen that there's no magic set of questions or a magic rubric that we can use to net the perfect SVP Chicago, nonprofit to support. But what we have learned is, where we can make the most impact. And I think this is why we're coming down, and on the side of these smaller community-based nonprofits that don't get the philanthropic support that some of the others that we've supported have gotten in the past, that can really benefit from our network, that can really benefit from our organization building support, because these nonprofits tend not to have board members that can do the work that we are doing with them. And so I think just through the process of kind of stepping back and thinking about, all right, is there really a downside, to working with these nonprofits? Is it really is all the diligence that we were doing before really netting us the organizations that could most benefit from our help? And I think when you answer those questions, it pointed us in the direction of these grassroots community-based organizations.
Just to connect the dot from where you left off back to the beginning, some of the angst that came from partners then is, how does this impact the scale, or how does this impact the scale of impact we're going to be able to have? If we're dealing with smaller organizations, they obviously have smaller sets of populations that each one is going to serve. And there's a hunger, I think it's a natural hunger for all organizations to want to show bigger impact. And so what we realized is then by shifting our focus where we're scaling into scaling the number of strategic philanthropists that we're able to influence. We
Mhm.
don't have to worry about this scale of impact that we're having necessarily with the nonprofits, and we can go deep and we can build relationships, and we don't have to rush it and trying to get the quick wins. We can be very intentional about our engagements, be very effective in how we work with them, learn what the best ways to engage with them, what really means strategic philanthropy. And then, as I've said, be loud and proud about that out in the philanthropic world. And so whether it's individual philanthropic individuals, whether it's, corporate social responsibility groups, the academics, the other foundations, really trying to scale our message that way and scale our impact that way.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me dig in a little bit on that. And you've made a perfect segue to our next question, which is, tell me a little bit about impact. How are you measuring? And how is this question alive for you in Chicago, especially since what you're doing is so philanthropist focused?
Sure. So we've struggled with impact measures from the beginning, because we want to be able to both communicate to our partners the impact that they're able to have in Chicagoland. We want to be able to measure our effectiveness as an organization, et cetera. And so it's something that from day one we've kind of struggled with, because the obvious initial impulse was to measure how the nonprofit community partners are operating after they engage with us relative to before they engage with us, and trying to measure our contribution to that success or that lack of success, for anyone that's gone backwards, but assuming that we are responsible and trying to claim credit for some of that growth of their impact, which felt wrong from day one, because there's so many factors that go into how these organizations are evolving and growing. And yes, we hope that we are pushing, we hope that we are lifting, we hope that we are contributing in big ways, but you can't really tease out what our contribution is, nor do we think it's right for us to try to take credit for the work that they're doing. And so then we started measures more about, were we able to achieve what we said we were going to achieve in any engagement? So, something we could put a box around, that we're working with nonprofit A. At the beginning of the year of nonprofit A, we said we were going to give this amount of money, we're going to do these 6 projects, we're going to have these 3 results. Did we do that? And so that was something that we could control and measure against. The problem there is that where we thought we would be engaged at the beginning of the year often is not where we ended up midway or towards the end of a year. And this is back to the trust-based philanthropy, where at the beginning of the year, we've got big plans based on all the work that we've done with other nonprofits. We may have decided what they first need is board work, and then they need this, and they may not be comfortable enough with us to push back. They might think that, especially early on, that some of the dollars we're giving are tied to them letting us set the agenda, and so they might want to play nice. And as the relationship deepens, and as they realize that we don't have strings attached to the dollars, and we really are open to, unrestricted funding, period, and capacity building, and we don't have to tie the specific work we're doing to the specific dollars, then over the course of the engagement, we learn it should be something totally else we're doing. So now if we're measuring against what the plan was at the beginning of the year, it often felt like we were failing, where in some of the best relationships where we felt the most positive, so the results were skewed there again. So where we've landed today, and again, I'm sure it'll look different, is what we call reflection sessions. So we actually measure our organization against the strategic plan, and we do it quarterly, where we get the board together, the advisory committee, and other people that are leading work streams or engagement with partners, and really talk about, have we achieved the goals at a high level strategic quarterly deliverable perspective that we had wanted to for that quarter? If not, why not? And if for the reasons that we haven't, are we being true to the culture and values that we set as the higher level guiding principles, and then therefore it's okay? Or have we achieved them, but we are doing it at the cost of some of the values we espouse, in which case that's not okay. And so we've been much more, and we call them reflection sessions, because they are thoughtful dialogues that we have with ourselves and the partners and our advisory committee. And so that's where we are today. And I imagine that, to the point when you asked the question, Rachel, we're working hard to figure out how can we actually measure mindset shift. And so that's something that we want to add to what we're measuring, so that since that's where we want to go deeper and scale, how can we measure how people are thinking differently about philanthropy. So I'd love thoughts on that if people have ideas, but that's where we need to get to.
Thank you for that. I think mindset shift is such an interesting, as a person who creates curriculum and learning experiences, mindset shift is always a challenge to get into in terms of the ripple of that, because often learning can evolve and then blossom with different regularity. It doesn't always happen within session, but it can happen, you know, later on or months later. So I love that. Evelyn, did you have anything to share about that?
You know, just to say that you can see or you can hear in what Cindy said, kind of the arc of our own focus as an SVP, right? I mean, it started out with such a focus on the nonprofit work that we were doing, which is why, you know, it started out with kind of portfolio reviews and progress against work plans, because, you know, that kind of was a proxy for kind of the work that we were doing with nonprofits. But since what we're talking about now is really about changing the way we do philanthropy in Chicago and strategic philanthropy, you know, it's the reflection, the shift to kind of thinking about our own impact through these reflection sessions really, to me, is a reflection of this, of you know, how do we think about and talk about mindset shift. Like Cindy says, you know, we don't have an answer to this. Would love some thoughts from this group about kind of, you know, how do we continue to quantify or even in a qualitative way, right? Think about the impact that we're making in terms of that mindset shift measure.
Thank you. Great reminder, Evelyn, that the chat is open, that the Q&A is open if folks have anything to share or add. I'm going to ask my next question, which is, what kind of feedback are you getting from your nonprofit partners, your financial investment partners about these shifts? What's your community's feedback?
Yeah, so I will preface this by saying, you know, when we ask for feedback from nonprofits, we're very well aware that, you know, there's a power dynamic there. So, but with that said, you know, we've been asking for feedback since our inception 10 years ago, and I've got to say, I'm so thrilled with the positive feedback that we're getting from our community partners, the nonprofits that we support. They have, you know, more so than in the past, been just super appreciative of the approach that we're taking. But I'll tell you, I think one of the biggest wins, like, you know, this was telling. I received an email in response to a question that I was asking a community leader like a month ago. Cindy, I'm not even sure I shared this with you. This is a community leader that, you know, I was asking him about something entirely different, and he just came back and said, and we had just announced some of the organizations that we were going to support as community partners going forward. And he came back and you know, he had recommended some of them. And he came back to say, oh, you know, these two are good friends of mine. And I love the intentionality that SVP is taking to supporting the West Side of Chicago. And he, you know, followed up with like, please let me know if there's anything else I can do to support you. And I thought that is such a great, you know, I didn't solicit that. It was such a great way for me to, you know, to kind of understand that the reach out that we're doing with community leaders and with these nonprofits, like the message is starting to get through, and they see results. And it's the action, you know, it's the following up and following up with the organizations that they recommended, and meeting with their leaders and making decisions that reflect what we heard from the communities. It was such a great moment for us in this journey. I would also say, you know, we've heard less than stellar feedback, and I'm going to share this story with you because it's part of the learning that that Cindy and I have been talking about. Is, you know, we're still new to this work in supporting these grassroots organizations. And in our most current selection kind of cycle, we one of the nonprofits that we were very, you know, that we've been very seriously looking at, they handled their finances in a way that made us as kind of wearing a more traditional investment hat, nervous. And we took a pause and we decided that we weren't going to kind of move them forward as a traditional community partner. We might find some other way to work with them, but we wanted to find out more information. So I was the one that delivered this message to this nonprofit leader. And her response, she was very professional, but her response to me was, you say you're about working with community organizations. And yet the first time something becomes kind of messy, you decline to move forward. And so, it was a reminder to us that, we need to really, when we think about this shift that we're making to support these smaller grassroots community-based organizations, they're not going to be as buttoned up as the organizations that we used to support. They may not know as much about kind of the ins and outs of nonprofit finance as an organization that has a CFO might have. And so, we as an organization and we as a board need our own mindset shift. We need, and we're developing a risk reward framework right now to help us, kind of align with this move that we've made toward investing in these smaller community-based organizations, because we have to get a little bit more comfortable. We need to be able to understand how much reputation risk are we willing to take on, and understand that the flip side of taking on more risk is that there can be much greater reward. I mean, the impact that we can have on these organizations could be much more significant than the impact that we can have on an organization that's much more buttoned up. And I'm gonna, I'll let you know, when I actually spoke with our own auditor, he kind of let us know, oh yeah, well, that happens more than you know. And his response was, so long as it's all, we got comfortable with his response, and it was such a good learning moment for us that, all right, we, our expectations need to change when we're working with organizations that are just generally slightly less sophisticated.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate you sharing and that vulnerability of that story of getting that feedback. And I love that you received that feedback. That's great. I have a question from the chat before we're rolling into the end of the session, but we have one question from the chat or from the Q&A, which is that some of our SVPs struggle to recruit partners with the message of "we'll help you be better philanthropists." How has your recruitment into SVP changed for y'all? What's your secret sauce? Or do you wait until someone joins to tell them that this is a learning space?
Yeah, yeah, some combination of it. To me, it's and the way that we do recruitment here, we're very hands-on. So I meet with every prospective partner, and I ask one of our board members to meet with every prospective partner, so that we can ensure that the fit is, and that the prospective partner and SVP are aligned in what we're trying to do. So some of it, to me, is about understanding why is this prospective partner looking to join SVP? If we are, I definitely talk about the work that we do with nonprofits, because it's the most tangible thing that, it's an easily understood thing. And partners join SVP because they want to be hands-on with nonprofits in a true skills-based way, right? And so I definitely do talk about that, but I find that in the context of that conversation, that a lot of people seek SVP because they might have been slightly dissatisfied with their options in kind of philanthropy otherwise. And so I have actually found that they welcome these conversations about kind of getting more strategic in philanthropy. I mean, everyone wants to know that their dollars and their time are going toward issues and solutions that are moving things forward in a more effective way. And so I have not struggled to kind of find people where that message resonates. But with that said, not everyone it should be an SVP partner because, there are folks where it's about kind of how can I put the most dollars towards something, for example, right? And that's not the SVP model. There are, you should go to a foundation if what you want to do is move the most dollars to an organization. What I have also found are other partners, like other collaborating partners, like organizations, corporate foundations, for example. If there are many of them that are more interested in the work that we're doing because of this change that we've made. And so I think it's been, nothing but good news from the perspective of raising our profile in the ecosystem and kind of becoming known as an organization that does understand or, start trying to understand how to work with these smaller community-based organizations and really helping our partners, our SVP partners, learn about, those organizations and how they can be strategically engaged with them.
Thank you. I'm going
Does that answer that person? Does that help?
Yeah, that's great. I love the sort of homage to collective impact and learning together is
Absolutely.
Potentially as powerful and power sharing as moving big dollars. Because I think that's what obviously this whole summit is about and We Give is about too.
We have so much to learn from the nonprofits that we work with, and
Absolutely.
that's been a bit of a shift in the way that we look at it too. It's not, we are not just teachers, we each have our own lanes. We are each expert in our own ways, and the learning goes both ways.
Yeah, I love that. With only about 5 or so minutes left, I'm going to move us to our final question. And that question is, if you had one suggestion for our listeners to sort of bring back home to their local affiliate or their local giving circle, what would it be in terms of starting to make these shifts?
I have 2 pieces of advice looking back to what we've done to make, we really started dramatically shifting over the last 3 years. And, there's been a lot of incremental change until then. And I think the 2 things that helped us change so much so effectively, first was starting at the mission. So we looked at what our mission statement was, and we're willing to be honest about, are we achieving this? Is this achievable? Does this still represent who we are today? Or does something need to change? And so the board, to their credit, was willing to, again, get rid of the dual mission and really focus on, scaling through strategic philanthropy, which then let us be much more intentional about the relationships we have with community partners. So I think if you start at that mission vision level and work down, the decisions become easier. And I would add actually values and culture to that. But if you what we call our operating framework, if you start there and move down, the decisions become a lot easier when it's all held together by a framework. And then I would say the second thing is then just iterate. You borrow the entrepreneurial, minimal viable product. Just get out there, make small changes. Don't wait till you've thought everything through. Don't wait till everything's buttoned up. Don't try to do a big reveal, because the ground is going to change under you, and what you're working on is just not going to. You're never going to get there. And I think so. There's a fear to just put something out there and iterate again. But that's where we've been successful. Again, it's partly, the open-mindedness of our partners not to be frustrated with us and to go along with all these changes as we make them. But I think those would be the 2 pieces: is start with your operating framework and make sure that all your decisions have a filter, or a filter and a compass actually to help you make them. And then second is just start small and start making changes. I don't know, Ev.
Thank you.
Other than start big and start small, what would you say?
No, I love what you said. I think so much of it ties back to, just that reminder of what it is that you're trying to do, and not getting too attached to, how you had, the processes or the frameworks that you had in place to achieve those goals in the past. I've loved the fact that at 10 years old, we still are in some, we reflect kind of what I think of as the best parts of being a startup. My board is incredibly willing to it embraces the idea of constantly learning and iterating. And it's been something, I'm an attorney by background, for those of you who don't know. And so this is something I had to learn, because attorneys don't iterate. You can get in trouble that way. And so I've come to embrace this myself. And I think this idea of just holding up, what Cindy is saying, like, what is your mission? What are you trying to do? And changing the how you get there to reflect what you're learning is just the best way to bring this home to your local affiliate.
Thank you so much to both of you. This has been such a pleasure. Again, I want to just thank everyone for being here. I wish we could see you as we all reimagine giving together, and we're all part of We Give Together. This has been such an informative session, and we hope that you'll join us at the coffee chats next week, and also reach out. We're always available at SVP, SVP Chicago, SVPI. And thanks to Philanthropy Together for hosting us. I'm going to pass it back to Kelsey to close us up. I know that there's a poll coming, so thanks so much.
Amazing. Y'all, this was truly a powerful session. I loved hearing more about how you're building those authentic relationships in your community, in your backyards. I love that you're moving through change emergently, and I love that you're rooting your giving at small local nonprofits. As someone who came up in the nonprofit world, that's always great to see. I want to remind all of you that there is a poll which we are going to launch now. Please share your feedback. We'd love to know what your thoughts are. And then I want to remind all of you, coming up on the hour is SVP's next network block, which is Partners' Journey to Reimagine Giving. So you'll get to hear more about that process. Thank you all so much for joining us. And it was a great experience. With that, let's cue the music and let folks go.